Hello, everyone. Welcome to Parker, Arizona. I'm Steve Weiss. With me today, off-road legend Walker Evans. Walker, you've won this race 7 times. What's so special about the Parker 400?
Well, it's the very first race of the season. A lot of new cars are brought down here, and we're all here to see what they're made out of.
Steve, this event always fills the streets of Parker with plenty of racers and the fans.
It may look like a big celebration, but the purpose of all this, first and foremost, is to make sure the vehicles are safe and race ready. It's a technical inspection.
It's also a chance for the drivers to display the names of their sponsors.
And here's last year's overall points champion. We asked Tom Denauld at what point he started looking beyond the Class 1600 title.
About halfway through, we were in contention for the overall. So we just stuck to our game plan and tried to run consistent and be in the top 3 at all the races, and it paid off for us.
Steve, off-road racing does attract creatures of all sizes and shapes.
Yes, Walker, you have to love those shades. That ought to help out in the sun. You also start them very young. This is the smallest racing suit that I think I've ever seen in my life.
We're seeing more and more women competing. This looks like some future stars.
Yeah, they look like they're ready to go. A big challenge facing the sport right now is the impact of racing on the environment. The government and SCORE have each made some compromises.
Our theory is that these same machines would probably run random across the desert if we didn't give them exercise and opportunity to do things in a controlled manner. We're running on used fire roads, we're running on old roads, we're not running on any new country. This is not like going out and running 80 cars abreast across pristine desert.
I don't think there's anyone more conscious of the environment than the off-road race enthusiasts, because they love recreation, and they love recreation in the desert. Their families, this is what they do as their hobby.
In the past, this race has taken place on both sides of the Colorado River, in California and Arizona. But this year, in an effort to protect the environment, the race course will just be in Arizona.
And here you can tell on our map how the race course is laid out. Walker, if you had to identify a couple of things that are going to make or break the driver out here, what's it going to take to win this race?
Well, we've got a 130-mile loop, so you got to have good radio communication. You have to have good pit preparation. You can't afford to have any downtime on this course.
Well, there you have it from a man who knows how to win here at Parker. A unique format today as Walker Evans in the studio will help us analyze the race he's taking part in. We'll be back for the start of the 1990 Parker 400. We're back at the start line. This is the Blue Water Marina right on the banks of the Colorado River. 285 vehicles will leave here one at a time with just a matter of seconds between each start. 130-mile loops, 3 laps. 62-year-old Danny Lettner, a former stock car driver, won this race overall last year.
We're just going to have to go for it. As far as trying to cool it and save the equipment, you'll never do it. So we're just going to go right at the ragged, critical edge and win the race, hopefully.
Meanwhile, as the four-wheel vehicles are lining up, the motorcycle classes are now reaching the finish line. The team of Rossler and Laporte is first across the finish line, but it's actually Ted Honeycutt and Dan Ashcraft who have the fastest time and are the overall bike winners. There are 8 motorcycle and ATV classes here at Parker. All these guys running a 2-lap race, so they'll be off the course by the time the other vehicles start. However, this guy is going to have some fun trying to nurse this quad home. Walker, can you imagine a 130-mile loop on this thing?
It's got to be frustrating for him trying to get that thing home with a broken tie rod.
Walker, that does look like it's a tough ride all the way home. Meanwhile, back at the start line at the marina now, this is Frank Snook and Eric Aris. First off the line in car number 101. As the Class 1 start, your class, Walker, the big Class 8 trucks are moving into position.
Steve, this is Jimmy Crowder in car 139, all the way from Tallahassee, Florida.
That's a long drive just to get here, Walker. Now we're going to go out to the course. This is Troy Herbst in 106. He's obviously off and running well early in the race. We're going to have a chance now to look through the eyes of our in-car camera. Today, riding along with the member of your race team, Walker, Brian Stewart. You can get a real good idea of what it's like to pull right up to the start line and wait your turn. The clock's synced up to your start, so you're always racing the clock and your competitors at the same time. Walker, as a driver, what thoughts are going through your mind right at this moment?
Well, we've been here many a time. Actually, we want to get a good start, a quick start, and we want to get on down that road and get up to that speed. Take a look at those gauges, see how that motor's running and looking, and then start thinking about what's the next turn. Is it a right-hand turn at the end of this road, or is it a left-hand turn?
And he looks like he's off and running just like you want him to, running very well at this point. Out on the course in front of Brian, this is Jim Greenway in car 131. And right on his heels, Ivan Stewart in his Toyota. Ivan's off to a good start. Back now to the in-car camera, and once again, Walker, what goes through your mind as you come through this section? We see a lot of fans lining the course right here.
Well, Steve, anytime you see a lot of fans, look out. There's got to be something rough or dangerous here. And sure enough, we got to negotiate through this bridge area and around these turns up through here.
Again, Brian doing it very successfully. Here's our first look at last year's Class 8 runner-up, the always hard-charging Robbie Gordon. He's obviously eyeing an overall win today at Parker. And we haven't mentioned it to this point, but even though we have 15 different classes in the race today, really it's the Class 1 and Class 8 vehicles that have the best shot at the overall title. Here's the guy that battled Robbie all year long, finally won Class 8. This is Scoop Vessels, and he's already down with the problem. Tough luck for him.
This is our first look at a Class 10 buggy. Ray Kroll and Tom Day in 10-13.
And here's our in-car camera with Brian Stewart as he negotiates his way through traffic. It looks like you guys hit a lot of silt right in this part of the course, Walker.
Well, we sure did. I was very surprised. I remember seeing these cars stuck down here in this area. As he negotiates around it, he made it around that one really clean.
And he gets the thumbs up from his co-driver, so he's happy to be through that part of the course. Here now is Rod Hall. Rod finished third in the Class 4 points race last year, a very unfamiliar place for him. He's looking to start 1990 with a win. And this is the guy he'll be battling all year and today as well. Steve Kelly, a racer you know real well, Walker.
Well, I sure do. Steve rode with me and drove for me for a season. He's a hard-charging driver.
I know he's glad to be here in Class 4, and he's going to make things competitive for Rod Hall. Now back on the in-car camera of Brian Stewart. He is coming right up on one of the real problem areas of the early stages of this course, and that is a very heavy silt bed. Walker, it looks like he's dead stuck in it. These Class 8 trucks don't have four-wheel drive. What do you do in a case like this?
Well, he sure is stuck. He's in trouble. He should have gotten in there a little bit faster, a little bit harder. And if he couldn't have got the speed, then maybe get out of those ruts would have prohibited him from getting stuck.
But now the thing to do is just get yourself out. And Mel Vaughn in truck 806 falls in the same trap that nabbed Brian. Here you are, Walker. We have a shot of you. You managed to get around the tie-up. Did you consider stopping and helping Brian, or just what do you do in a case like this?
Well, no, Steve, you can't do that. I immediately jumped on the radio and called the crew and said that Brian had a little problem, so they're probably on their way down there to get him now.
All right, I guess that is the radio communication you were talking about earlier, how important it really is in a race like this. Comes into play right away. Meanwhile, Frank Mancha in 819 has joined the bottleneck. It's forcing the oncoming traffic to get around those three trucks any way they can, and as you can tell, it is tough to do. Look how deep these guys are now in the silt, and really with nowhere to go. It's next to impossible to dig yourself out. Finally, Brian Stewart gets another vehicle to try and tow him out of there.
Well, he did, and our crew showed up just on target, and they got him right out. Fortunate for him. Now he's back in that event.
So he loses a little bit of downtime, 10 or 15 minutes, but at least he's back in the race and able to run again, and that's the important thing. The chase person narrowly getting out of the way there. Here's Robbie Gordon really putting the hammer down to try and get out in front of the class. Robbie now trying his hand at a number of other forms of racing. A lot of folks saw him perform quite well at the 24 Hours of Daytona earlier this year. And Walker right after him. Here you are, right on Robbie's tail.
Well, he set a blistering pace right off the bat. He got by a bunch of cars. Now I have to too.
You have to pass the same cars. Every car he passes, you have to pass them as well if you're going to stay with him. Dave Schopp in 810. Dave won the Class 8 battle here at Parker last year, so he knows and I guess likes this course very well. And now we have a newcomer to Class 8. This is Scott McMillan, and he's driving Dave Schopp's old truck.
The 1600 buggies are headed for that silt area. 1636 is Art Peterson.
And he manages to get through it, but it sure isn't easy. Walker, we're going to go back now to the next car coming through this section and look at it in slow motion to give everyone a real good look at just how tough it is to get through here. This is Corey Vasquez in 1637. And by the way, for fans new to the sport, this 1600cc class is the largest and one of the most competitive in off-roading. 55 of these desert buggies this year at Parker.
Here's another one of the 1-2 1600s. This is 1642, Ralph Barwick.
And he is definitely getting a mouthful of silt right here. That can't taste too good. Some of the early class leaders in the 1600 class include car 1609 with Mike and Morley Williams. They'll be sharing the driving duties today. They're off and running well.
Here's Mike Spina from Las Vegas. He's in car 1620. He's setting a blistering pace early in this race.
And he also looks to be running very well, as you said, up near the top, at the top, in fact. In this class, Walker, you can have either a one- or two-seater. Mike prefers to do it alone. Here's the overall early leader, Troy Herbst, in his single-seater unlimited buggy. That's probably the biggest change in the sport this year, the combining of what was formerly Class 1 and 2, single and two-seater unlimited engine machines into a single, very competitive class.
Steve, here's Mark Hamilton in car 134.
And Ivan Stewart should be right behind him. There he is. Another driver who prefers to do the entire 400 miles on his own. We asked Ivan before the race how he felt about the combining of Class 1 and 2.
The Toyota truck, as well as it's running to run with all the guys, all the top guys, the Class 2 and the Class 1, it's going to be dynamite, going to be competitive and just downright good racing.
Any major changes in the truck from last season to this season?
We've done a lot of suspension changes. We've done a lot of testing, more testing than we normally do. The truck is working very, very well. We've got lots and lots of miles and hours on it, and the more miles we put on, the better it is. So we're learning, and I think you're going to see the Toyota truck right up front today.
And that's exactly where it is. Here's Danny Lettner in one of the bumpier sections of the course, his suspension really working to get through here. This kind of racing right here has got to be about as far away from his flat track stock car days as one can possibly get. Whoa, look at this, Walker. Brian Collins' race car is doing a little tree trimming along the way. His co-driver tossing the spare twigs out of the vehicle as they continue down the road. That's amazing. Let's look at that again, this time in slow motion. And Walker, I guess this is just one of the hazards of racing through a desert.
Well, it sure is, especially in a tight, narrow sand wash. Anytime you hit something like that, it's going to come right in that open windshield, including rocks.
And that includes almost all of the vehicles, including your big Class 8s.
Anything that has an open windshield.
Walker, we're going to hook up with Jack Johnson's co-driver Brent Foes now with our air-to-ground radio system.
Tell us a little bit about this first lap. What are you running into out there?
Everything seems to be working great. Jack's doing a good job, and we're just trying to keep a nice steady pace going. We're on schedule, but this is the first time in Class 1 that we're doing real well.
We asked Jack prior to the race how he felt about moving from Class 4 to Class 1.
It's kind of exciting getting to go into a new class because I get to race with a lot of guys I used to race with when I was driving single-seaters. But it's really not a real change in direction except that we get to go full tilt. You know, I don't get held back any at all. The truck is basically the same as it was. We've done a few improvements on it, tried to make suspension work a little better and a little more horsepower to it.
That's Jack Johnson with his Nissan now in Class 1. Bill Poe is using all of his horsepower to take the early lead in Class 10. This class is for single or two-seaters, limited to 1,650cc engines. Poe finished second overall last year in the Class 10 points race to Randy Wilson. And now here is Mike Sharinga in truck 815. He's dancing through the rough stuff here with a couple of buggies. That's Jim Sumner's red buggy number 1623. And watch the nifty little move put on here by Class 10's Mike Zupanovich as he slides by 1027. Stay with us. We'll be back with more action on off-road racing. We're back to off-road racing, and you're looking into the cockpit of Class 8 driver Brian Stewart. I don't believe we've mentioned that Brian is the son of Ivan Stewart. This shot really gives you a good idea of what it's like to race in one of these vehicles. And Walker, while we've got a moment, tell us what it is about Brian's driving style that convinced you there was a place for him on the Walker Evans race team.
Plain and simple, Steve. He has a driving style that's aggressive, and we like that.
This is Robbie Gordon again. We're going to check in with his co-driver to see how things are going. For those of you at home having difficulty picking up his radio transmission, we'll once again flash it across the screen.
We haven't had any big problems at all. First, we've been watching the temperature a little bit. We've been keeping the pace down. We know Scott's behind us. We know we're the first truck on the road. Truck's running great. Tires hanging in there. We haven't had any flat tires at all.
It really is amazing the wear and tear all of the tires on these vehicles can take here in the desert, and I'm sure Robbie will continue to test his throughout this race as he continues to set a blistering pace. Here's the Scott he was referring to in our air-to-ground interview at Scott McMillan in 811, and he is right behind Robbie. The two big Ford trucks really going at it early on. Actually make that three Fords. Here's Dave Schopp, and Walker, you and Mr. Schopp have been battling for a number of years now.
I've known Dave Schopp ever since the middle of the 70s, and he is a tough competitor in that Ford truck.
And he will continue to be as his race effort is really gearing up for this season. Now, here you are, Walker. I'll bet you were surprised to see Robbie broken down here in front of you. What were you thinking about when you passed him at this moment?
I was very surprised to see him parked there. After all, he doesn't usually break down. Look at that. I think that's a pitman arm. Maybe it's a sector shaft.
In any event, he is down and he is out, and when you pull the hood off, that's a pretty good sign that you're having some major, major problems. We had a chance to set down the helicopter and ask Robbie what happened.
You know, up through this real rocky section, we broke our pitman arm, and, you know, we were just cruising along the best we could. Things happen.
What kind of downtime are you looking at right now?
Approximately 5 minutes, hopefully.
Here's Scoop Vessel's up and running again after taking care of the driveline problems we saw him stranded with very early on in the race. And here's Bob Gordon apparently having a better day than either his son Robbie or good friend Scoop. Bob in car 121 running very well on this first lap. Bob and Robbie teamed up to win the overall title here at Parker in 1987.
Of course, he's going to have to go and get ahead of a few cars, Steve, including Mark Hamilton here.
And Mark is continuing to run well at this point of the race. Walker Jerry Penhall and our racing dentist, Dr. Bud Feldkamp, are also running well in car 127. They also have a real shot at the overall title if they're able to keep this pace up. Now we take a look at Jack Johnson again, really pushing his Nissan truck through this rough stuff, and I'm sure he's about where he wants to be as we approach the first lap here. Jack, by the way, has also had some success on this course. He won the Parker 400 in a buggy back in '82 and '85. Here's Scott McMillan, currently leading Class 8 since Robbie Gordon broke down. Scott is a former Class 2 driver who says he enjoys the view out of the bigger truck. I guess that makes sense. Dave Schopp is running second in Class 8. He's making his way through the traffic here, just a couple of miles short of the pit area near the start-finish line, and as you can tell, he beats this buggy right to the corner.
This is Chris Miner and Dick Simpson in truck 814. Chris, of course, is the son of Larry Miner, who is no stranger to off-road racing. Larry also does a lot of drag racing nowadays.
Chris is driving the truck used by Steve Kelly before he moved to Class 4. And Walker, here you are coming into the pits near the start-finish line after your first lap. Bring us up to date and tell us what you were talking about to your pit crew on this stop.
Steve, right now we had to make a decision whether or not to change my steering box. I'd had a few problems with it about 10 miles back. It locked up a couple of times. That's what we're discussing with Randy right now. Just the last 4 or 5 miles, it seemed like it was working just perfectly. And instead of downing this truck for 20, 25 minutes, I chose to go ahead. After all, when you're in the heat of battle, sometimes the wrong decisions are made. I hope this decision doesn't come back to haunt me.
And as you well know, Walker, as competitive as Class 8 is, if you don't make the right decision, it could cost you the entire race. As you leave the pits, we're going to take some time to learn more about the host city of this race, Parker, Arizona. Parker, Arizona is a small desert town located about 130 miles west of Phoenix. The town sits right on the banks of the beautiful Colorado River. Parker comes alive each January for the annual SCORE Parker 400. That's when the spotlight really shines on local racing hero Manny Esquera. They would love Manny here even if he didn't win, just for the great Mexican food cooked up in his restaurant in Parker, Los Arcos. Manny's restaurant and all of the local businesses really appreciate the thousands of dollars pumped into the local economy each year by racers and fans when they're in town for the Parker 400. Actually, this area does pretty well the rest of the year thanks to a growing recreation reputation and nearby tourist attractions such as the London Bridge in Lake Havasu City. Living in the desert may not be for everyone, but the folks living in Parker believe they have some of the prettiest and peaceful scenes you'll find anywhere in the country. It's not very peaceful today, though, with the likes of Ivan Stewart blasting through the desert, the Ironman looking for his first win at Parker as a solo driver since 1977. And one of the guys determined to keep that streak alive, Jack Johnson, continuing to roll right along. He'll make the pass here at the end of the road and continue to set his sights on Stewart and the rest of the overall race leaders. Right now, the top guys running in Class 1. And from our vantage spot high above the desert, here's Rich Minga in his unlimited Baja Bug, the former HDRA SCORE overall points champ as a Class 9 driver, currently leading Class 5 at Parker. Here's a look at the top 5 overall leaders. As we go to the scoreboard, it's Herbst, Hamilton, and Stewart on top, followed by McMillan and Schopp. Stay with us. There's lots more to come on off-road racing.
Join in the excitement of off-road racing by becoming a member of the High Desert Racing Association. A $50 membership fee includes a rule book, t-shirt, decal, and 1-year subscription to the off-road race journal, Fast Tracks. contact the HDRA office at 12997 Las Vegas Boulevard South, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89124. Or call 702-361-5404. Make it official. Join the High Desert Racing Association today.
We're back with more off-road racing, and this is our first check on the mini truck classes. This is the unlimited Class 7 vehicle of Larry Ragland.
Steve, Larry told me he and his crew are going to build a truck that's going to compete in Class 1, and it'll probably debut at San Felipe 250.
And that'll be the next race we broadcast here on TNN, Walker. Meanwhile, here's the man chasing Ragland, last year's Class 7 champ and a familiar name to race fans everywhere. This is Roger Mears. Roger looks like he might have caught a rock in the windshield. This is the race driver we told you about just a little bit earlier in the program, Parker's own Manny Esquera.
And Steve, believe it or not, Manny got his first taste of racing right on the Colorado River in hydroplane boat racing.
That is something different. He's the driver who's dominated Class 7 in the 1980s, winning the season-long points battle all but 3 of the years. Walker, you've done some drag boat racing yourself, haven't you?
Well, I sure have, and I'll tell you right now, the waves never got as rough as these deserts.
Well, I guess it at least would be a little bit cooler, Walker. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the Class 7 truck of Kim and Axel Moore. You know, there are only 7 trucks in this class. Much like your class, Walker, it's very expensive to try and compete against the factory-sponsored teams. They put a lot of money into the sport. Climbing out of the driver's seat here at the pits, this is Debbie Bunch handing the driving duties over to her husband, Bill. Debbie was formerly a driver of one of those ATV Odysseys in the motorcycle class. She won the Parker 400 in that class last year, as well as the season points race. She definitely has more horsepower under her this season.
Steve, here's Spencer Lowe, the leader in the stock mini pickup class.
And right on his tail, it's the Class 7 4x4 leader, Paul and Dave Simon. Paul, a former mini medal champ. So we have 2 class leaders running right together. You know, Spencer Lowe does a fair amount of SCCA racing when he's not in the desert. We're going to check in with Spencer with our air-to-ground radio system.
Bring us up to date on your run so far today.
The run hasn't been too bad, really. With the wind blowing like it is, seems to dust down pretty way away from the car. It hasn't been too bad. We've been going right along.
Any real problems at all to speak of?
Oh, none whatsoever. We took us a little ways to get into the lead, and it's just keeping up a real good pace to stay out front.
Have any idea how much of a lead you do have at this time, Spencer?
Last time I had talked to my crew people, we had about 4 or 5 minutes.
You feel like you'll need to at least maintain that to keep that safe margin from here on in?
Yeah, 10-4. It's going to take a little more than that. This is only the beginning.
Spencer knows there are a number of 7S trucks not that far behind him, and you can never get too comfortable even when you have what appears to be a big lead. Here's one of those trucks. This is Terry Brown and Bill O'Brien of San Diego in 724. Notice the big TNN sticker on the roof. We certainly appreciate that. And look out now. Here comes a member of the Walker Evans race team. This is Rob McCachran in 720, and we've got ourselves a real dogfight here. We'll cut to the ground camera and get a better look at the battle. Great race action. Neither one of these trucks wanting to give up the advantage, and I would think that this should get your heart pounding if you're in either one of those 2 driver's seats at the moment. Rob McCachran wins the battle here, just as he did last season, winning the 7S and Mini Medal season-long titles. We're going to check in with his co-driver, Bruce Fraley, to see how things have been going today.
Just kind of cruising along for the first time that Jeep Command GM. We had a slight problem back there a ways. Got everything taken care of. Now we're just trying to catch back up. We'll get back up, no problem.
What was your problem? What happened to you?
We broke one of the supports in the frame that hold the front end together. We got it all welded up and material added. It's pretty good right now.
We talked with Rob before the race about his 1990 expectations.
There's a lot of new competition out there. Everybody's got new trucks. We got a new truck also. With everything that looks right, we'll have a really good season again. Hopefully we'll back up the Mini Medal Championship again.
This is Jerry Welcho. He was running second in Class 7S after the first lap. Jerry is from Laguna Hills, California, and he also is a competitor in the stadium racing.
And here's the truck of Johnson & Johnson, a couple of very experienced and successful off-road drivers from different parts of the country. Chuck from Illinois and Johnny from California. Johnny's done real well at Baja. This is a pretty formidable team in Class 7S. Walker, now we're going to check in on the pack chasing the 7 4x4 team of Simon & Simon. This is Jerry McDonald in 762.
Jerry has been racing off-road buggies, trucks, and motorcycles for just about 20 years.
And this is two-time Class 7 4x4 champ Mike Leslie, who is now devoting full time to his race activities and doing very well at it. He's going to pull over right here. This doesn't appear to be a regularly scheduled pit stop. We better check and see what he's up to.
Just needed a little fuel.
Well, that's all it was. Mike didn't have a whole lot of time to talk. It didn't take him a whole lot of time to refuel and get back out there. He's got some ground to make up to try and catch McDonald and Simon, who are both out in front of him.
Steve, this is John Swift from Oxnard, California in truck 764.
John's also working hard to make up for lost ground to the leaders of the four-wheel drive mini or mid-size pickup class. Another check on Class 1600. There's last year's champ Tom Denault.
This is the buggy of Mike and Morley Williams, continuing to run well here at Parker.
And according to the Score International computers, Walker, John Marking and Gary Cogbill with 1624 are right behind them. And now we have the guy who was leading when he passed through the start-finish line on the first lap in Class 1600, 1620, Mike Spina once again from Las Vegas.
1607 is Willie Higman and Chris Patton in a Volkswagen-powered Chenoweth, and they're on their way to a very quick second lap.
And now, Walker, will take a look at 1627. Gary Sewell and Gary Jones, they're also contending for the 1-2 1600 race today at Parker. Here is one of the Chenoweth Mini Mags, one of the newer classes in off-road racing, Bud Harris from Oklahoma City, out in front.
Steve, this is Rod Hall and Jim Fricker in 403. Again, coming through a very bumpy, rough section of the course.
What's that hanging down there, Walker?
Well, it looks like a vent line to me. I don't think it's going to be any big problem, but it is hanging down.
Well, it certainly isn't slowing him down any, Walker. Here's Steve Kelly keeping the pressure on Rod. We're showing this to you in slow motion, Walker, so you can really help us understand how these big trucks handle the bumps.
Well, obviously, you can sure see that suspension at work. And that's what it takes when you're packing 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of weight through the desert.
He's making it through there all right. It is bouncing, but you're telling me he doesn't feel too much of that, I guess. Here's the truck that's been running third all day in Class 4, Tim Pruitt and Billy Holmes in 449. So it's Dodge, Chevy, and Ford running 1, 2, 3 in the class. Now this is Rich Minga still leading Unlimited Class 5. And yes, for those of you that haven't seen this car before, it is a Porsche 911.
Steve, when Minga came through the pits on his first lap, he had a 16-minute lead on the second-place car.
And that would be Gene and Sharon Norman in car 503 kicking up some silt as they come around the corner here. The Normans are from your hometown, Walker, Riverside, California.
Positioning himself in third place right now is David Pick in 501.
And who says you have to make a big, fancy, flashy pit stop, Walker? The bottom line is fill it up and go. This is about as informal as you get.
This is an aerial look now of car 549. This is George and Sandra Jackman.
Also of that Unlimited Class 5. Now let's move on to Class 5, 1600 Baja Bugs, limited to 1600 motors. This is Wayne Cook and Ross Kraft. Wayne, part of that Cook Brothers effort that won this class points title last season. 558, George and Greg Tuttle. With so many classes and cars, how do we keep track of everyone, you ask? Well, Walker Evans has the answer. Good radio communication.
Obviously, in off-road racing, you have to have your hands on the steering wheel or on the shift lever. You cannot be reaching for microphones. Here's some of the things that have been designed to help the communications to the pit crew, such as microphone mounted into the helmet. This style of a helmet, you have earplugs. This open-face style helmet has a boom mic, and the speakers are fixed inside the helmet.
You occasionally see a car using a hand microphone, but it's usually the co-driver that's using it. Because of the great distances involved in these races, we rely on these radio relay vans parked high on a hill. The radios in the truck like mine are used to keep in touch with our pit crews. At all times, the pit crews need to know where we are and any problems that might develop. The radios are a vital link for race officials. That's the only way they can track what vehicles have passed through what checkpoints. They can then plug that information into a computer to figure out race times, and it also gives a system of tracking vehicles down, which is very important for safety reasons.
This piece of race equipment is as important to me as a driver as any other component on this vehicle.
Thanks, Walker. If Troy Herbst is in touch with his pit crew, then he's well aware that he's out in front for the overall race today. He's about to lap a slower vehicle, and Walker, that will provide us with a classic example of nerfing. Tell our audience exactly what that is.
Well, obviously you can see it's a little touch here. When you're in a narrow area, those things do happen. They'll get the guy's attention. After all, if you blow a horn, he's not going to hear it. He's got a motor between you and the other car.
This is Mark Hamilton once again in 134. Off-road fans are certainly familiar with the Hamilton name. Mark's father, Willis, has had considerable success in what was Class 2. And here's another look at one of our overall leaders. It almost looks as if Ivan Stewart takes a quick look over the shoulder there to see who's behind him. And one of the guys back there is the Raceco-powered buggy of Marty Lettner. Marty is Danny Lettner's son, last year's winner, and the two of them have been running together all day long up among the leaders. This should be a real competitive team here in this class. This is Jim Greenway teaming up with former Class 10 champion Craig Watkins. Craig says he really likes the extra power he finds in this unlimited class, and they are driving a Toyota-powered Raceco buggy. Scott McMillan was leading Class 8, but it looks like he has a problem and is pulling over. That means we should see a leader change in the Class 8 battle with Dave Schopp stepping in and taking advantage of the breakdown.
Jack Johnson's still in the hunt. He's worked his way up to the top 5.
You know, Walker, there has been a little bit of grumbling from some of the other Class 4 drivers. They wanted Jack to stick around, but I know he really has his sights set on the overall title, and he believes the way to do that is to move to the unlimited class. Here's the man Jack and everyone else is chasing, Troy Herbst. As we take a break, we'll take a look at the race for the overall title. Stay with us. We'll be back with more off-road racing. More off-road racing action, and this is what brought Class 8 Scott McMillan to a stop. He's getting some help on a quick tire change. Just because you're in the middle of the desert, though, doesn't mean you have to rough it too terribly much. His truck comes equipped with an air gun powered from the truck. That makes stops like this much, much quicker. He's off and running already.
This is Chris Miner in 814, as we mentioned earlier. He's the son of Larry Miner.
And Walker, despite that pedigree, he's still looking for his first Class 8 win ever. Coming up next, we have Greg and Ron Kishiyama from Culver City, California in 807. And Walker, they have run a pretty steady race here at Parker. Something I've noticed in covering this sport over the years, a lot of times that strategy works because a lot of your competitors will run hard but break down.
Well, that sure is the truth in this case, Steve. He has run smooth, and it's showing it right now.
Walker, there's a quick shot of you, and you seem to still be running hard at this point, as does your teammate Brian Stewart. We're looking through his in-car camera once again.
Well, here we are coming up around this corner. It's a great shot. A lot of fast action roads here in Parker, Arizona.
Well, it's smooth and fast here, Walker, but as you know, there could be a big bump just waiting for you around the corner. Here's a good little battle going on. Car 143 is Lou Peralta, and 816 is Dave Westham coming into the picture right behind Peralta. This gives race fans a pretty good idea of why passing in this sport can be so difficult. This really isn't a particularly dusty spot on the course, but it's still real hard to see much beyond the back bumper that's directly right ahead of you. Here are some of the Class 9 cars. These vehicles are limited to 100 inches of wheelbase. 922 is Jack Miller. Because of the limitations on wheelbase and engine size, these vehicles aren't as quick as some of the other buggies, but it's another one of the very competitive classes. 900 is Rich Richardson. He's last season's Class 9 winner. 997, Ron and Bill Brady. They run a Volkswagen-powered Chenoweth, and this is pretty bumpy stuff they're having to put up with right here. We're going to get a chance to see the Class 4 leader, Rod Hall, tackle this hill. And Walker, this stuff right here is the answer to why when many of the fastest trucks and buggies can do well over 100 miles per hour, the average for an off-road race is about 50 miles per hour. This terrain really, really slows you down. As Rod's closest pursuer, Steve Kelly, comes up the same hill, I want to ask you, Walker, as a driver, you see something like this up ahead, what do you do to try to find the fastest way to get up it?
Free-running definitely helps you get through these kind of areas, but picking that right line also means very, very much to you.
And it looks like Steve Kelly has managed to find that line, Walker. He's up this hill in pretty good shape. He'll be able to continue his run after Rod Hall. This is today's Class 10 leader, Mike Zupanovich, standing on his horn and the foot pedal as he passes a slower vehicle right before that same hill. And now we have 1013. That's the buggy of Ray Kroll and Tom Day. After a strong second lap, they've managed to move themselves up amongst the leaders. They're currently running second in the class. Next up is 1030. That's the car of Ed Beard. He's in third in the class. You can see him really shading his eyes as he comes up the hill as the sun now dropping right down near the horizon. It's getting a little bit tougher to see this late in the day. And Walker, watch how hard Scoop Vessels is working to make it up this hill. Scoop has had a real rough day. This little section here is like adding insult to injury. This doesn't look to be a very fun ride.
I'd assume at this point he's just trying to get that truck home in one piece.
And speaking of trouble, Dave Schopp had been leading Class 8, but he's really slowed down now by the air-to-ground radio. Let's find out what happened.
Right rear shocks are gone. Our right rear springs come off. We're just trying to get up here to J Road and go from there. No one passed us yet. I think the Kitchamitas and Scott McMillan are closer.
How close is McMillan? Real close. That's him blasting by in what was once Dave Schopp's truck. That's got to really smart.
300 is David Ashley. He's led here at Parker right from the start in Class 3.
And Class 3 Walker is the shorter wheelbase 4x4 production vehicles. Number 347 is the vehicle that pretty well dominated the class before Ashley arrived on the scene. That's Don Adams, longtime racer from Nathrop, Colorado. 305 is Mike Schwellinger's old vehicle, but today it's being driven by Madeline Leslie and Kurt LeDuc as they wait for Madeline's new Jeep to be built, a Jeep they believe will compete quite favorably in this class. The story behind Madeline Leslie is a very interesting one, and she is the focus of our Personality Spotlight. The Personality Spotlight, brought to you by KC Highlights, America's #1 choice in driving, fog, and off-road lighting. In 1977, a young woman from Southern California won the Amateur Women's National Motocross Championship. She later traveled to Australia to perform an Evel Knievel show.
If it's nice, maybe we'll go to the park.
13 years later, Madeline Leslie is the wife of off-road racing star Mike Leslie and mother of 3. Most people aren't aware it was actually Madeline who introduced her husband to the sport. For the last couple of years, she and Mike have been kicking around the idea of Madeline returning to competitive racing. Plans that were nearly sidetracked when they discovered 9-month-old Talon had a serious health concern.
We just found out that he has hemophilia, and it's a big adjustment. We just found out a couple of months ago, and it's real stressful, and you just have to always be on guard, so it's really a lot more work taking care of him. But I have a lot of support, family, and I think we're going to do just fine. You got everything you guys need?
5-year-old Travis and 3-year-old Tara go to preschool, and Madeline can now have a chance to do something she believes is a very important part of her routine, working out.
I need to keep myself in shape for the kids and for the routine that we have, going to the races, helping out with everything, and just to keep fit.
Madeline also spends time at Mike's race shop, where he works on his Class 7 4x4 truck. It has some of the same features Madeline will find in the Class 3 Jeep Cherokee being built for her.
The shifter, that'll be the exact same shifter you're going to run. Okay, it'll be a 3-speed.
Is there any doubt Madeline can rekindle her competitive spirit?
I used to ride motorcycles a little bit with her, and she can whip me on a motorcycle. So, you know, she'll do quite well, I'm sure.
Mike knows a little something about winning as a 2-time class champion. Even though they'll race in different classes, what if Leslie and up on the course?
Racing's racing, and we still are real competitive with each other and everything.
Everyday life.
Yeah.
We want to thank the Leslies for letting us come into their home, and we certainly wish Madeline a lot of luck this season. Meanwhile, back at the race, this is Larry Ragland at 7:01. You can see the sun continues to drop as the afternoon wears on, and Larry has managed to put some distance between himself and the rest of the class. As he makes his way up the hill, we can tell you that Larry's goal was to make this the 17th straight race in which his vehicle has managed to finish, which is pretty impressive in a sport where you're lucky if half the entries make it to the finish line at the end of the day. Roger Mears had a great second lap to pull within 10 seconds of Ragland on time, but troubles on lap 3 have forced him to play catch-up. A broken rear shock and a problem with the ballpoint are what has put Roger behind. And Walker, for new fans of the sport watching today, 605 is Larry Schwackefer, and yes, that is a 57 Chevy he's driving. He's a member of Class 6. That's a class for production sedans. Larry has been around for a long time.
And Larry's from Hemet, California, and he's actually pretty famous for running these 55 and 57 Chevrolets across the desert.
Walker, this should make you happy. The newest member of your team, Scott Douglas, formerly a Class 7S champion. It's his first race in this vehicle, and Class 6, and he's well out in front. And we want to show everyone car number 1199. That's Saul Zambrano from Los Angeles. This class is for stock production Volkswagen sedans. Looks like Sauls managed to hold him off at the corner. Walker, we've had a chance to check in on all 15 classes today, but this is the class we've kept track of throughout the race. Troy Herbst is within 5 miles of the finish line, still the overall leader. As you see him get by Roger Mears. At this point, all Troy really has to do is bring it in without a problem, and he'll take home the top prize.
The only man who can really catch him is Ivan Stewart, now in second. And you can see Ivan has flipped on his lights for the final few miles in, right at sunset.
It is getting a little bit darker out there, but plenty of light still to see with on the way. And Walker, we want everyone at home to watch real closely now, because this is an unbelievable finish. Notice Troy slowing down, and look at the area near his rear tire away from the camera. Watch closely. There, do you see it? Mears has to slam on the brakes and slide to the side. Herbst is obviously upset. He knows something's wrong with the car. He's lost all the power in it. He's going to actually come to a screeching halt here and start to climb out of the vehicle. Walker, any idea what happened?
Well, I believe he's lost a CV joint. That's what went flying across the desert there.
We'll look at it one more time in slow motion. Watch closely. There you see it out of the back end of the car. And that is definitely going to hurt his chances. We're going to now check in on Jack Johnson, find out what happened to him. If you were wondering what happened to him, look at his vehicle. You can tell he's had some major problems. He is into the pits and will not be a factor in this race the rest of the way in. Meanwhile, Ivan is still running at top speed, now gaining rapidly on Herbst, just up ahead of him, but he is now in serious trouble. Troy Herbst, that is.
Herbst is now being pushed to the finish line. It's obvious the car is not under its own power. That's probably going to be Ivan pulling up into this scene here in a minute.
And I'm sure, Walker, that Ivan has been told by his pit crew that Herbst is down, so he's going to push it all the way in because he suddenly has a chance to win. Troy Herbst, now in full view of race officials at the finish line, is pushing the vehicle on his own. But look what happens here. When he hits the little gully just before the line, the car rolls back down. He can't push it up any further. He simply collapses and falls to the ground. Unbelievable. There's no way he's going to get that car up the hill in his condition. He's obviously exhausted and certainly aware that Ivan is just probably a minute or so behind him. Some friends of Troy decide they might be able to get the car moving again if they work on it. But frankly, he doesn't look like he's in any condition to even get out of the car, much less push it across. That's probably what made his friends decide, let's go for it, simply pull him across the finish line. To add to the confusion of this whole scene, we're told the actual finish line is a few yards back, of course, at the final checkpoint, where the vehicle's official race time is officially recorded. So the question is, did he actually need to get to the checkered flag? In any event, Ivan has now crossed the finish line. He's made up all of the lost ground and will win because of a better elapsed time. He's in 9 minutes faster than Herbst. Troy also now faces a penalty for receiving help on the way in. We'll be back to sort it out. We're back, and as we told you, Ivan Stewart is the overall winner of the 1990 Parker 400. The question is, what happened to Troy Herbst?
I turned in coming home to the finish, and all of a sudden I put my foot on the gas and there's nothing there. So I got out of the car and I pushed it all the way in.
I was listening on the radio, and evidently they were pushing the car the last mile, and that's against the rules. From what I understand, that's too bad, but I guess that's racing.
So it's a disappointed Troy Herbst appealing his case to score race officials, while nearby Ivan Stewart pops the champagne cork and salutes Toyota, Yokohama, Bilstein, KC Highlights, Eclipse, and a long list of sponsors.
Mark Hamilton finishes second overall and second in Class 1.
And Chris Miner in a GMC wins the battle of attrition in Class 8. He also finishes fifth overall. We asked him about it.
The last lap, we were running third starting the last lap. We were probably, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes off the leaders. And we just kept plugging away. Didn't have any problem.
The Kishiyamas in a Ford end up second in Class 8, even though Scott McMillan physically finished ahead of them since Scott was penalized by the race review board. Now looking at Class 10, Mike and Jim Zipanovich get their first win of the season in their Toyota-powered Class 10 buggy. A good run for them. They had a really steady race all day long. As did Rod Hall in his four-wheel drive Dodge truck. A great day for Rod, in fact. He not only wins Class 4, but also finishes 9th overall. I'm sure he's got a lot of confidence in that vehicle right about now. Larry Ragland is the Class 7 winner in his Chevrolet S10 pickup. Mears did have a slow third lap and ended up slipping to third. Manny Esquera slips in and takes second. Paul Simon started. Dave finished. It's a Class 7 4x4 win for the Ford Ranger of Simon & Simon. Spencer Lowe in his Nissan is the first 7S vehicle across the finish line, finishing 16 minutes in front of Rob McCachran.
Marty Hart finishes first in the unlimited Baja Bug Class 5.
A good day for him. Darren Hardesty and Creston Pons lead from start to finish to take the crown in Class 5, 1600. That was the only glimpse we had of them, but they did have a really, really good day, as did Mike and Morley Williams, the winners in Class 1, 2, 1600. They had about a 10-minute margin at the end on Sumners and Tollison. Dave Ashley picked up right where he left off last season with the win in Class 3. Dave was last season's heavy metal champion, and he's off and running again in 1990 in his big Ford Bronco. John Knutson and Glenn Elliott in Class 9 also led from start to finish. They take home a Parker Trophy to El Toro, California. And Walker, you ended up 9th in Class 8.
Well, we sure did. We have had better days, and believe me, there'll be a few more, too.
All righty. Here's a final look at the top 10 overall. We'll be back to take a final look at all of the class winners at the 1990 Parker 400. Stay with us.
As off-road champions know so well, it doesn't matter how great a day you have at work if you can't find your way home in the dark. KC Highlights, America's #1 choice in driving, fog, and off-road lighting. We come alive at night.
Walker, as we take a final look at each one of the class winners, we'd like to take the time to thank you for your participation here on the Off-Road Network. We've enjoyed working with you. Hope to get a chance to do it again. We'll be joined by some of the other top off-road superstars in our upcoming broadcast, but you've certainly established a standard that'll be tough to match.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. And on behalf of Dodge, Jeep, Goodyear, American Racing, and Barbary Coast, as well as Craftsman, we all want to thank you for allowing us on this program.
Thanks again, Walker. Thanks to Score International for race results, Ford for our ground vehicles, and Bill O'Brien and Echo Air for their support. Our next race is the Score San Felipe 250. Thanks for joining us, everyone, on the Off-Road Network.